To jump into this video, we're actually going to start with a tiny bit of story time. So I'm going to take you back to 2009, which was my first year as a science teacher. My state, Arizona, had just purchased a $12 million contract from Pearson to use a standardized testing instrument called the AIMS, and that was going to test students in reading, math, science, and writing. And that was going to create these report cards for different schools. So on one hand, there was data available and measurement to show how schools were doing in teaching science. But on the other hand, the way that students were being asked to show their science learning was reading multiple choice questions and writing open response prompts, mostly about the content. And when schools didn't get such a great report card, this could impact their funding as well as teacher jobs. And that was a little bit intimidating. So I dug into my standards. This is a list of standards that were similar to what I used in Arizona in my first year. Notice that the verbiage, knows, 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 and knows, really primes a teacher to think, oh, science education, science teaching is really just about making sure that the students know something. So I had this dream of being a super cool, hands-on, dynamic teacher, and I had this giant list of standards staring at me, telling me all of the things that the students needed to know to pass the test to get the school report card. So I can't lie and tell you that NGSS takes all of that feeling of racing through of standards away, but when you read those performance expectations, I hope what you'll see is that they are really asking you to do something different. They are asking you to make sure that students are actively doing science and engaging in the practices, thinking about the cross-cutting concepts, connecting all of the science together, and using meaningful, relevant phenomena to explore content in new ways. And I hope that that makes us all feel like we're doing the right thing and like we're not just tied to this race to get our country and our states ahead of each other, which is very much the rhetoric that was coming out of a lot of the educational reforms in the 80s. This is where a lot of standards came from. This is where teacher evaluations came from, and they're not always the most feel-good things in education, but hopefully these NGSS performance expectations and really knowing what we need to target in our scope and sequence can bring back some of the joy and the focus on the good things. So the NGSS performance expectations are like a standard, but they tell us exactly what the student performance should be evaluated on, and they always include the 3 dimensions. You'll see this in everything on the NGSS website with the scrollable features, and you'll often see them with color coding, which can help us decipher what the practices are, what the concepts are, and what the core ideas are. Typically, schools adopt NGSS, and teachers are most familiar with the content, maybe after years of being given that list of knowledge-based standards or content-based standards, and they just recognize the DCI, the disciplinary core ideas, and they make minor adaptations to their assessments and their curriculum, and they say, yeah, we adopted NGSS. Now, the 2 neglected areas tend to be the skills that are embedded in the science and engineering practices. These are similar to the scientific method, so sometimes teachers can recognize and apply that right away. However, using them a little bit more flexibly and finding them as the endpoint in different performance expectations can pose a challenge. The most forgotten about dimension is the cross-cutting concept, those ways of thinking about science. They're often forgotten or they're adopted last, but they're so important. I share this from my personal experience in a person that's been working to adopt NGSS in my school for the last 7 years, and now working with people in other schools. This is just a really common trend. So why are we learning to unpack the performance expectations today? So that we know that how students do the science with the SEPs and how students think about science with the CCCs is just as important as the content. And a final tip for best use of the performance expectations is, as a person that works in curriculum development, I thought that understanding by design was everything. So I thought as long as I understood the performance expectations, I could figure out the outcomes, I could make the assessments and the activities and have the perfect units. But after a while, I felt like there was really just so much missing from the essence of NGSS. And that's because we weren't focusing on phenomena as much as we were the unpackings. So when you're digging into your performance expectations and you're seeing what the disciplinary core ideas or the content is about, that's when you find these amazing phenomena that students can engage with and develop driving questions that really become the glue in holding all of the activities and assessments in your unit together. So again, saying that from experience, get to know your performance expectations, don't neglect the SEPs and CCCs, and really learn to love and seek out great phenomena so that you can really get your units started in the right way and keep them moving from activity to assessment.